Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. On this podcast, we go week to week watching something on TV. In this particular case, we'll be discussing the latest episode, the third episode of the series Tax, of the third episode of the series Task, not Taxes, but Task, on HBO Max, an episode called Nobody's Stronger Than Forgiveness. I don't think anyone says this line. Do you remember that at all? I mean, even when I was taking my notes. Yeah.
So. And I feel like I was listening for it because I checked the title a couple times while I was watching because they talked explicitly about forgiveness, but I don't think these words were said.
Now I have to look to see if this is explicitly a quote from something because I made that mistake before. This week, by the way, so everybody knows, first of all, Sona, I think I sent you the trailer for this. Maybe not, but it is very funny. And it starts on Tuesday. It is Ethan Hawke with half of the creative staff from Reservation Dogs. Ethan Hawke, by the way, had an episode, the one of the very last episodes of Reservation Dogs that he guest starred in. And that last season was had very, very high highs, and but always good, but just uneven compared to the brilliant first season. I thought personally, I know people love the third season. I thought it was uneven, but the Ethan Hawke episode of Reservation Dogs, you can watch it just as a bottle episode. It is one of the best episodes of television I've seen in years. It is so good. And anyway, I guess they had a great collaboration because now he is starring in a very big Lebowski style comedy noir set in, take a look, maybe Oklahoma. That makes a little more sense, actually. And anyway, it's like one of these sunny noirs like The Big Lebowski. And he is so hilariously funny in this trailer. And it's called The Lowdown, and it's getting great reviews. One of the highest scores of a show in recent history. I'm going to see.
I know you've always been a huge fan of that show.
Yeah, Reservation Dogs, so much fun. But this is also, very much in a different, genre. Not only is it this kind of sunny noir, like I mentioned, a much more comedic tone. I mean, although Reservation Dogs also had a lot of comedy in it, of course. But I just like this type of show where it's like a noir, where this guy's kind of a loser. He's not a detective, by the way. He's an investigative journalist. And he stumbles upon a conspiracy. It's one of those guys who believes everything's a conspiracy. And then he starts investigating. And it turns out it is a giant conspiracy that he's caught himself up in. So I really do like this type of thing. This is one of my favorite genres. And the trailer I have watched the trailer multiple times and I laugh out loud. Good signs for this show. So that's called The Lowdown. Starts on Tuesday. I will definitely be covering it here on a podcast, possibly by myself. We'll see how that all works out because there are so many shows coming out. And of course, expect on Wednesday, Darren and I will be discussing the season finale of Alien Earth. It's already over. That season's already over, amazingly. Another very short season of television. I think I asked you this already, Sona, but is your husband watching Alien Earth by chance?
I don't think he is, actually.
Oh, I thought he might have been an Alien fan. He's a little bit of an Alien fan, right? He hasn't watched everything. He's just kind of in it a little bit.
Yeah, he's not anti-alien, but he's not an Alien super fan either.
You have to be careful how you say that nowadays, but
good point.
So that's wrapping up this week. I do know that a lot of people are jumping in now at the end. I literally have friends in our friend group. We were just hanging out and they're like, have you seen Alien Earth? I'm like, I'm covering it on the podcast. So I guess people are just starting to binge this thing now that the finale is coming. If you're behind, check it out. You might be curious to listen to it. It's been uneven. Very curious to see how it lands here at the end. And FX obviously wants to make this they spent a lot of money on this series. It really shows. It's a very expensive production. And they want this thing to run for multiple years. Question mark as to how satisfied audiences will be with this. But it is definitely very ambitious. So we're curious about that. And lastly, Sona, probably the show I think that you and I will be covering going forward. We will continue to cover Task here, by the way. I'll figure out who will be co-hosting. Maybe Sona does double duty. Maybe Darren hops over to Task, question marks. But one show that Sona and I will definitely be covering is The Savant, which is starting this week. Sona also starting this week. Such a busy week.
When it rains, it pours.
Indeed. And that's on Apple TV starting this Friday. And another FBI series, procedural, based on true story, with Jessica Chastain playing this profiler who infiltrates white supremacy groups And based on this New Yorker article, where apparently outlined 900 different terrorist attacks that were subverted by this one woman's ability of infiltrating these organizations. This is highly fictionalized, of course. So I think that there is actually a bad guy that she's trying to prevent an explicit terrorist attack. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of action. There's a lot of action in the trailer, actually. So I'm sure it'll be much more ramped up, but very intriguing, especially in this current climate, to investigate what is actually happening out there, even if it's just through a fictional story. And of course, like I mentioned, we will continue to cover Task as well. Oh, a couple of things just for viewership. I know, Sona, you're not that interested in this, but maybe some folks are. First of all, 28 years later, which we covered here on the podcast, just within a day of announcement, Netflix announced that it was going to be available on for streaming. And of course, it is now out. It premiered on Saturday. It's already like the number one film on Netflix. I wasn't a huge fan of that film, but it was extremely ambitious. And of course, we covered it here in a podcast, just letting anybody know if you missed it in the theaters, now you can watch it on Netflix, which everybody on the planet apparently has. So very easy to watch this one. And another premiere this weekend, big one, Superman premiered on HBO Max. And once again, Sona, I have to ask, I think I asked you this already, but did your husband see the Superman movie?
I cannot remember if he saw it or not, but he definitely is a Superman super fan. So I wouldn't be surprised if he'd seen it.
So now I should say he and your son can watch it if they want to. It is, it's some violence in it, but it is definitely geared towards kids. The funniest thing about this, by the way, is after you watch the Superman movie on HBO Max, they're like, you may want to watch Peacemaker, which is also from James Gunn and also in the universe of Superman. Peacemaker actually has a cameo in the Superman movie. If your kids are like, Daddy, can I watch Peacemaker now? It's like, no, you cannot watch Peacemaker, because in the premiere episode, there's like a bisexual orgy with full frontal nudity. So it's not in the tone at all.
Thanks for the heads up on that.
Yes. So I think a lot of people are going to make this mistake. Don't do it. Peacemaker is very funny, by the way. I very much enjoy it, but not for family viewing at all. Oh, and last thing I want to mention, Sona, that I got together with some of our friends, our mutual friends from high school days, and we saw Spinal Tap 2. The End Continues.
That sounds like such a fun activity for you all.
It was, the review of it basically is that if you're a huge fan of Spinal Tap, you will chuckle a few times watching this. And we were half of the audience in the theater seeing this.
Wow.
Which is like very.
And how many of you were there?
There was 5 of us. And yeah. Okay. And they had only one screening for the day because the movie has been such a flop that they basically reduced all the screenings down to one screening for the entire day, and still could only get 10 people in the theater, including us. And it was mildly amusing. You'll chuckle a few times if you love Spinal Tap. And lastly, Sona's Black Rabbit has been a huge hit, by the way, since it premiered last week. I did watch it. I binged the show. I do recommend it, although it has its problems. Did you catch any of this?
I literally watched 15 minutes of this before I got pulled away, but I liked the 15 minutes I saw.
I would say to anybody who watches this, I actually didn't like the pilot very much. It was trying a little hard to be too many things, I think, at the same time. But if you have that same experience, do stick with it, because episode 2 is very different than episode 1. And rather than just being like, why are these 2 loser brothers getting themselves into this giant mess, and why should I care? If you have that general opinion after watching episode 1, I should say. When you see episode 2, what's really interesting is the canvas broadens, and you see that all these people, this artist that they hang out with, and this friend of theirs that came up at the same time, who now is an investor in a restaurant and now is a famous musician, and the woman who they brought in as their chef, who's now becoming a star chef, that everybody's on this ladder and they're all compromising themselves and they're all trying to get to the next rung. And they're like, I just got to make it one more rung. I just got to make it one more rung. And it's like they are becoming more and more morally compromised and caught in this moral quagmire, all these bad decisions they're making. And it's all because they're like, I just need a little bit more. I just need a little bit more. And of course, that all connects to how, in a way, it's the addiction of the one brother, but how everybody's addicted to being on this wheel and like deluding themselves that I could just get out of it. If I just go a little bit further, I could make it out. And that thematically, I thought was really interesting.
I mean,
And
isn't that the story of so many things these days? I
oh,
mean,
yes,
just hearing you describe it, of course, reminds me of Breaking Bad,
right.
which ended up being a lot more complex reason that he wasn't getting out. But I think it's a very common theme lately.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously you have some shared DNA with Ozark. I think if you were a fan of Ozark, this will definitely work for you,
Hmm.
although it's set in a very different milieu, but it touches on some of those same themes of like how you lie to yourself and you just say, well, and I'm just making this one decision for this one thing. It's not so bad. And then it just keeps compounding and compounding. But what's interesting is that obviously the center brothers are in like life and death straits. But what I really liked about that second episode is how they expand this exactly like you mentioned, that we're all kind of on this hedonic escalator, let's say, where we just keep thinking that, well, we get further and further from what our original goals were, but like, well, I've come this far. Well, I've come this far. And then how you keep, making
Hmm.
potentially bad decisions because it's like, well, I've come this far. And of course, the brothers are making the same decisions, but for them, it is truly a shit show, as you would expect. And of course, they're both addicted and they have family history that is revealed over the course of the episodes. So all of that I thought was really intriguing. It was really well done. It's all very dark. I don't like the look of the film, like in general. I had the same problem with Ozark, by the way, and Jason Bateman does direct the pilot episode here as well. So maybe that's his
Interesting.
style that is a little too dark for me. It's too muddy. Um, I do like a crisp dark, like a David Fincher type look, but this doesn't have Christmas to it, a crispness to it. It has a real muddiness to it, which I didn't like that. But I thought the material was good. The performances are terrific. It's too long, as all Netflix series happen to be. Also, like some of the stuff, the decisions that are made later on seem a little really crazy. Like, okay, well, there's no coming back from this, people. There's no rationalizing some of this behavior. So it does go a little too far over the top. But overall, especially where they land thematically with how everything lands with the characters, I thought was pretty interesting. I recommend it. It's not great. It's good, but at moments it's great. It could have been great, it's my opinion. It's still enough good to recommend it. So stick with it, in other words. All right, so now let's dig right into episode 3. I think we went right into conversation, so just a quick introduction. I'm Victor, your host, and Sona joining
Hi.
me again for this episode. Again, this task, episode 3, called Nobody's Stronger Than Forgiveness. By the way, this episode is directed, a different director. There's 2 directors for this entire series. We've seen our first 2 episodes directed by Jeremy Zager. But in the little featurette that comes on after the show, they talk to the director here, who her name is Sally Richardson Whitfield, who's very recognizable as a character actress. She's actually an actress. If you actually see the featurette, you'll be like, oh, I've seen her before. I recognize her. And you look at her IMDb, you see that she's been in a lot of stuff. Not like a giant star, but she's been in a lot of TV mostly. But I did want to call that out because this episode for me, Sona, I thought was the performances are so strong. And
I
there's
loved
these,
it.
specifically these moments in like pretty long conversational moments where they really get into the emotion and the themes of the show, and the characters, the actors really get to breathe in these roles. And I did want to shout that out, that of course an actress directing is going to and maybe that's why she gets to direct these specific episodes, because they are more about those performances and those interactions rather than the action.
Yeah, I loved this episode. So it's interesting to learn that. I did not see the feature at the end of the show. I always think it's going to roll into Mare of Easttown because that's what pops up next. And so then I turn
Right.
off the
Yes.
TV.
By the way, to your point, absolutely true. I always have to go and like say, no, keep playing the credits to get to the featurette, because they will
Good to
just start
know.
playing Mare of Easttown if you don't interact with the remote control. All the things we speculated on in episode 2 are laid out immediately here in episode 3. And sometimes that kind of annoys me. It's like, well, you were subtle last time. Why do we have to be so explicit? But I'm not going to be critical of this, because this scene is one of the highlights of the whole entire episode. So I'm not going to be critical about it. We've picked up immediately after episode 2. Robbie is in the car with Maeve. Of course, they want to be out of earshot from the kids to have this conversation. And
Which
everything that
is
was
a funny thing for me because, and maybe you've had the same experience with your daughter. man, those kids hear everything.
Right. Of course. Of
And
course.
they know when you don't want them to be listening, and they pay extra special attention then. So I don't blame them for getting in the car to have this conversation.
You know who hears everything in this particular episode of the show? We'll get around to it. But Erin, she hears everything.
Yes. Good
Always.
point.
Always
Good point.
listening. But some of the dialogue here is pretty amazing. Maeve questions Robbie, like, why did you do this? And he says, they murdered my brother. Then they had the nerve to show up at the memorial service, hug you, shake my hand. Jason shook my hand with the same hand that he used to beat your father's brains out.
What a crazy thing to say, right?
I know.
Bananas.
And I had to stand there and nod my head and say, thank you for coming. So yeah, I'm going to take their money so we can have a better life. And then Maeve retorts, truly, he does need to reset a little bit here. Even if he did do this for the kids, that now they're going to spend the rest of their lives without their father, hearing stories about how he's a murderer, a thief, and a kidnapper. That's your legacy. And he says, that ain't my legacy. And she says, now it is. So what do you think of this? I mean, and it goes on, by the way, the dialogue, just the whole idea of him. And she's saying that you've ruined your life, the kids' lives. And he gets very angry and says, what life? That he's like, I'm a garbage man. I pick up people's garbage. Yeah. I smell like their garbage.
Yeah. First of all, I agree with you. A lot was spelled out here that was left to inferences in the prior episode, but I thought very clear inferences. I say, as somebody who likes to have my hand held quite a bit when I watch a program, I think some of it maybe didn't need to be spelled out, but I don't mind it because I do like to have my hand held. I felt proud of myself that I didn't need it spelled out for me, that I had inferred properly. But I think this really set up this feeling of impending doom, because Maeve is accurately calling out that, like, while the emotions driving these actions are legitimate and can empathize with them, what is the end game here? There is no way this ends well for them, and definitely not for Robbie.
Right. And I mean, when you think about, we'll get around to it, but the conversation he has with Cliff, pretty much booking ending the episode here, because it comes pretty late in the going. But his plan is he's in fantasy land here. He's straight up in fantasy land at this point. So meanwhile, the Dark Hearts, they are trying to strike a deal with Freddie Frias, which...
Another amazing scene here. Yeah. So excited about this. Go ahead.
So Perry and Jason show up there. Very interesting here that, it starts off pretty friendly. He's like, what are you prepping for? Oh, it's my daughter's wedding. What do you think of the guy? Is he a good human? He asks. And he's like, no, he's a piece of shit. But he's convinced my daughter that he's a great guy. So I guess I have to go with it here. But then, of course, when they're in private, this whole conversation about, well, someone's going to come with that fentanyl that we lost. You're the most obvious choice. You're the only one who can move that product. We don't want anyone to know about it. Laying out, once again, everything that we inferred last week, of course, connecting those dots. And then we get a little bit more on Frankie. He's not going to take 25% of this. He wants 50%, because basically he lays it straight out there. And this is where I disagree a little bit with his tact here. Do you want to be this confrontational with these folks who,
yes,
like it or not, this is your partners in crime here. But what do you think they're setting up here? Obviously setting up the context for Freddie and his animosity and how this is a very tenuous relationship. But do you think this is going to blow up in some way? I would say that would probably be their laying groundwork for that, except for the fact that how much time do we have left on the show? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's enough time for a gang war.
Season 2.
Right.
I think it's kind of filling out the really great montage that we saw in the other episode of the roles that each of these groups plays in this area of Pennsylvania. And for me, I really just loved the backstory of why Freddie is making the deal that he's making, even though I do agree with you that this is not something that seems to be in his own self-interest to take a hard line on.
Honestly, I thought the scene I didn't love the way this scene is written, basically. And what I would have done is, he could have just been like 50%. And they're like, why would we give you 50%? And it's like, you came to me with this deal. Why would you give me 50%? Because you have nobody else to go to, right? And then they could leave and then he could like tell that story out of their earshot. It just seems so antagonistic for like, you're basically, they are your pipeline to the drugs. And, there is this whole situation where, he knows full well that he needs them to distribute the drugs outside of the city itself because of the racism and all the reasons he outlines. But it seems like that type of relationship, you don't ever, confront it head on like that, because you do have to work together the next day. And that's just how it works. So I don't disagree with the performances or anything else. I really disagree with the way it was written, that it just seems nobody's going to have this conversation. It's basically my opinion.
Yeah, I get that.
But of course, they're laying it out that this is tenuous. So for example, if Frankie does betray them in the long run, he's like, if he sees that this is a way to undermine them, he'll take that opportunity. He could care less, right? So we could have gotten that information without having this explicitly said out loud. As a matter of fact, he seems to be pretty savvy, considering how successful he is. Probably not the way he does business on a regular basis.
Yes, good point. Maybe it was the stress of the wedding.
Yes, he does not like this guy that his daughter's marrying. So
he just couldn't take anymore, and he misdirected his rage.
Exactly. He also has kind of like nothing to lose, right? They are in this symbiotic relationship, whether they like it or not. So, okay, so Tom and Anthony Grazanova, soon thereafter, go to meet with the Dark Heart group. Lots of macho posturing here. And, Perry and Jason have like no interest in talking to them about this, but they actually get a very helpful piece of information here when, by the way, I should mention the clue here, which I don't know if it was this episode or last episode, where they've discovered that one of the guns that they have that was used in the actual home invasion that was left behind was at this shooting a year or two earlier at Reading. So the ballistics match. So they're just letting them know, we know that somebody from inside the organization was involved in this shooting. And by the way, you are, you have a mole in your midst, which they already know, and both sides know. So it's interesting. I like this scene, by the way, the dynamic here where they're basically letting each other know that we know what you know, but putting it out on the table. However, maybe a mistake for Tom and Grazzo to have laid out some of this, because when they walk out the door, they're like, "Who was at that shooting?"
Yeah.
And of course, that is going to probably lead to negative consequences for whoever is involved here.
Yeah, I like this scene and the interactions between the characters. But I did feel, from a strategy perspective, they gave a little too much information to the bad guys.
Who do you think, whose gun is this? You speculate on it, and I'll tell you what I think.
So maybe I misunderstood, but I thought that the ballistics were showing that the gun that was used against the couple who lived in the house,
right,
came from the Dark Hearts, right?
Correct.
So I was thinking that Robbie took the gun from his brother's things.
Yes, right. That's exactly correct. Yeah, so I think that's my same assumption. So I think that
fantastic. I followed it through.
You figured it out. But I make the same assumption, and that's going to lead back to Robbie, right? It's going to be Billy's gun. And the question is going to be, how did Billy's gun end up at that place? And then who would have had access to Billy's gun? It's going to be a very short list of folks, right? They may not even need that as a clue by the time we get to the end of this episode. In other task action, we have Agent Lizzie Snickerdoodle and Agent Aaliyah Clinton. We find out her last name is Clinton. They go to Peach's workshop and they say, any information at all that's useful. What do you think about this this sequence? Once again, I don't know. I understand the we see very much a very important episode here for developing the Aaliyah character. We see her taking the bull by the horns and using her authority to, make those guys pay attention to her and not make all these sexist jokes. So she is able to show strength there, but also, of course, later on, she's a real standout moment, which we'll get to as well. But I felt like primarily this was to show that Lizzie's still not really qualified for this job. And I'm like, I think we've seen that in pretty much every scene she's in. So I'm not sure.
I don't know. I feel like they took her incompetence to a new level in this episode.
Right.
Before she seemed like maybe she was just distracted. Now she seems actually incompetent.
Right. So, I mean, maybe instead of, that's a good point. Instead of when we first meet her, it's just like, okay, she's just going to screw up or she's not focused on her job at the moment because of her personal life. And maybe it's like she has a messy personal life because she's just a mess, period. And that might be more the truth. If there's a redemption arc for her yet, I don't know where it is. I mean, they're making her a more sympathetic person, but I'm not sure they're really showing her to be qualified at all to be doing this work. Okay, then a big reveal. We didn't really see this one coming. I had this character, by the way, when we were just speculating on who could possibly be the mole inside the Black Hearts or the Dark Hearts, I guess. I keep saying Black Hearts, but the Dark Hearts. And this
Leave
Erin,
Joan Jett out of this.
she looks like she's definitely was a biker, so
Yeah.
they might have had to change their name at some point in the past to distance themselves from her. No. So it turns out it's Erin. It's actually Jason's wife. And I actually had her on my list because she was there listening to what was happening at the bar as well. But then I immediately discounted that because I'm like, well, how would that make any sense? So what'd you think about this reveal?
I think, first of all, in the captioning, it's Erin with a Y. So I wanted to note that.
Yes.
But also,
Jason has a Y in his name too. Jason with a Y as well.
Interesting point. Maybe she...
that's what brought them together.
Yeah, maybe she didn't have a Y until they met, and then she wanted to be symbiotic, and she put a Y in her name. I don't know.
Maybe maybe when they married each other, they put a Y in their names.
In any case, I had forgotten she exists. So
same. Yeah. She's only been in like 2 scenes so far. So.
Yeah.
This is pretty fascinating, though. Not in the text of the show, but what they're introducing here. So first of all, what was the thing that Billy did that was against the rules? He had this affair with Erin. But there's pictures of them and everything. So was this an affair, or were they actually separated? Like, was she actually leaving him? And then he goes and gets retribution against Billy for this. Maybe that's why even the biker gang, the remainder of the gang, don't really know all the details, because maybe they would think that's out of line. Like, okay, you killed somebody for your personal, reasons. Mm-hmm. And it seems like people don't really trust Jason as a leader anyway. That's obviously it turns out that is Erin's plan, right? To undermine Jason so that they will get rid of him. And I assume when she says get rid of him, they don't mean get rid of him as leader, like vote him out. I think they're talking about getting rid of him, period. And then it makes me think about like how that is such a extreme potential revenge that she's going to get. But she seems to be obviously trapped in this circumstance. Not only was this person she was in love with murdered, but that means that she is, a captive. She's pretending to play along because it's the way to make this as painless as possible. But this is a really messed up situation. I don't know how well they can explore it here on the show.
She's playing a really dangerous game.
Absolutely.
Really, really dangerous game. But I guess, she says she was in love with him. And we all know that vengeful lovers can do crazy things.
But you also think that maybe she doesn't have a way out, right? If she decides to, just say, I want to put this all behind me, would she be able to, right? So maybe she has to get rid of him, not only as revenge, she needs to get rid of him to get out of her circumstance. Do you think he's going to let her get a divorce? She probably wanted to get a divorce before, and obviously that didn't work out very well.
Yeah.
She shouldn't have slept with somebody in the gang, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, whoever she slept with was going to end up dead regardless, I think. But...
True. Cliff, meanwhile, doesn't really doesn't trust her anymore, doesn't like what's going on here. He's becoming a little bit of a loose cannon here. I think they're definitely setting that up. And she's giving him good advice. You cannot sell the drugs. And he's like, we need to sell the drugs right now. She's like, do not sell them. Do not sell them to Freddie. She's heard that too. Once again, she hears everything. Mm-hmm. She knows that they went to visit Freddie today. So he knows you're coming. You need to find an alternative. It's interesting what Cliff says at the end as they're leaving. He says, she got what she wanted, and now we're on our own. We got to look out for ourselves now. Which is weird because it don't seem like she was trying to say, you have to protect me. She was trying to warn them from not getting themselves killed in this circumstance.
I guess to the extent he was hoping that she would help him find a way out of this, affirmatively find a way out of this, not just directions to stay put and do nothing.
Right.
He feels like he can't count on her.
As far as being on their own, that does make sense because they don't have money. They, the cops are closing in. They've
got this kid.
Yeah, they have this kid. I think to get this situation out of, and they blame her for that too, right? Because she didn't know that or warn them
Right.
that that was a
I mean,
circumstance.
that was a huge misstep to not have that intel, although we see how it happened, but yeah.
Yeah, she wouldn't have necessarily
Yeah.
known. She knew that the
Right.
dad was there. Why would he have brought the kids with
Yeah.
him? It's not an expectation. And he probably hasn't done that before. Or if he has, he's hidden them in the basement or whatever and not let
Right.
anybody know that they're there. So it wouldn't be common knowledge, I would assume. All right. So no, we're not even in the middle of the episode here. A lot of plot being laid out here, a lot of
A ton
confirmation,
of plot.
assumptions, a lot of plot early on. The night that they go into Cliff's house, by the way, the cops, that's only the midpoint of the episode. I'm like, man, this is a short episode and it's a lot of episode. There's a lot of
Was
episode
it
here.
short though? It was like an hour long, no?
It's an hour long with all the, the featurette and everything at the end. I think the episode itself probably ran only, less than 50 minutes or so.
Well, it was
Now I have to
dense.
look. It was very dense, yes, for sure. I don't have the runtime here in front of me. But we get a couple, there's room for a lot of stuff in here. We got a couple of really heartbreaking scenes. We see Emily go to visit Ethan in prison. She tells him that dad, he asks, how's dad? She goes, dad's really worried about you. He's, hoping for the best. This is a lie, of course. And Ethan knows it. He goes, he was here, dropped off my suit. He didn't say anything to me. So he knows he's been like beaten down. Apparently he was chubbier and now he's like lost weight. So that everybody keeps commenting on that he looks very different with less weight and with his hair trimmed short. And he just ends things at the end saying like, how are you feeling about the sentencing? And he goes, it's all my fault. And whatever the judge says, I just have to comply with it. It's all my fault. What am I going to do? So it's like just, he's obviously feels horrible about what he did. And I think this is an important scene because it's very easy to imagine this rageful teenage kid shoving the mother down the stairs and, seeing him just as this violent perpetrator of the crime and dangerous, right? By the way, people say this over and over again, like it would be dangerous to bring him back. Even Emily's afraid of having him back. I guess he maybe terrorized the house in general with his violent outbursts. This seems to be the case. But then to see this kid who's just completely lost and feels absolutely horrible about what happened.
I do think that this was an outburst, but there wasn't an intention to,
Right.
to do any kind of lasting harm. Just lost control of himself and shoved her, and the consequences were just so dire.
I think everybody has, even the people who can't forgive him, have the opinion that he didn't do this maliciously, but he's going to create a dangerous situation in the home again. Everyone's wary of it anyway. It doesn't really matter. So this kid obviously is, in a terrible spot. And then another heartbreaking scene right after that one, we get to see Amelia is taking Sam to the waterhole to learn how to swim.
Maeve.
Oh my God, I said Amelia. That's the actress's name. I'm sorry, Maeve.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't know who
Yes.
Amelia is. Okay.
Yeah, that's the actress's name. I don't know
And
why
I
I called
actually pulled up the cast this time, so I'm ready.
it. Yes, I usually do that as well. And yes, Amelia Jones plays Maeve. But so I was calling her the actress by her name. But yes, Maeve. Maeve takes Sam down to the waterhole and finds out that Sam can't swim. This kid, of course, very sweet. Man, I'm very
So
worried
sweet.
about setting this sweet kid up. I'm like, man, he even tells the deer, he's trying to tell them to make sure to stay out of the road again. I'm like, oh no. I just have a feeling now that things are not going to go well for this kid. I'm very concerned.
He's so precious.
Maeve says, my dad taught me how to swim. When I went to a party, I didn't know how to swim. So he just threw me in. And he's like, hey, sink or swim, figure it out. And then he says, do you want to learn how to swim? And she goes, don't worry, I'm not going to throw you in.
That's how my husband learned too, I think.
I think that's how I didn't learn that way, but that's how a lot of people learned back in the day. There's a very sweet interaction here where she's very gentle with Sam. And he says to her, I think you're a better teacher than your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then she says, that's the thing about getting older. You get to choose what you take from your parents and what you leave behind. What do you think about that idea that, part of growing up is being able to leave behind the worst parts? And Maeve maybe wanted to do that, and maybe how Robbie is incapable of doing that.
Yeah, I think that is what those of us who want to be healthy, functioning adults generally do. And I think it is a big part of adulthood to realize you don't have to carry all the baggage that was given to you. You can just leave it where it was and move on with your life without that baggage. I think that's a really big thing to understand as you grow up. And probably for Maeve, being in the position she's in, she's understanding it a lot younger than most people do, because she essentially has become a parent, which I think is when a lot of these things become evident, right? Because whether you mean to or not, sometimes you find yourself repeating patterns from when you're a child.
Right.
And if you're self-aware, you stop and take a second and think, just because it was done this way when I was a kid doesn't mean it was the right way to do it or the best way to do it. So should I really do it that way because that's what I know? Or should I try and find something that might be healthier or less damaging? Anyway, so I love that she said this. And I think it shows a lot of self-awareness about her character and what she's experienced in her life.
And getting to that thematic element for the whole episode of forgiveness, which is right in the title, of course. Part of that, taking the good and leaving behind the bad, requires forgiveness of our parents, right? But in a lot of ways, forgiveness would have solved or at least improved a lot of the problems, like if everybody had forgiven each other,
Yes.
or some people had at least, that there would have been a lot more progress made here, and potentially these people wouldn't be in all these dire straits. But it's easier said than done.
Of course. And it depends on how horrible the quote unquote crime is, right?
Right.
Certain things are easier to forgive than others. When lives are at stake, I can understand why you struggle with that.
Yeah. I mean, you think about who potentially needs to forgive. You have Tom and his family having to forgive Ethan, and how difficult that could be, given the fact that not because he's a malicious person, but just the loss is so unbearable. And then, of course, yeah, you could say the same thing about Maeve and Robbie need to move on with their lives and say, hey, I need to have a happy life with my family and forget about what happened. But how do you forgive somebody who's just like right there, still a neighbor of yours, practically thriving, who murdered your brother and your father, right? Like it's very, these people, it's going to be, they put you in a really tough situation here, because it's very easy to say, it's exactly what Tom said, what the Mark Ruffalo character said last week, where he said, I used to have a simple answer for people who came to me and said that they were going through this horrible thing. And he says, God has a plan. And, and he's like, now that he's gone through it, he goes, he doesn't believe any of that anymore. Right? And once again, it's very easy to have these platitudes that say like, hey, you got to let it go. It's the only way to live your life. Sure. Easy enough to say, but very hard to live it.
Even then, Robbie's thing is everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, true. He still says that. That's a good point. So just like, supposedly like the platitudes that you heard before.
Right.
So maybe his is just as empty as everybody else's. Meanwhile, Cliff knows a guy, Ray, who used to be a cellmate of his. And this guy knows a little bit about fentanyl. So they go visit him. He's like, man, I can't move that kind of fentanyl. But then he decides, oh, yeah. I do know somebody. Why don't you just stash that in your house, and we'll talk about it tonight. I love, by the way, that the way they introduce this character. First of all, you immediately know that he's abusive, so that pays off later on. But I love the choices of having him in the ref uniform the whole entire time. I'm like, does he work at Foot Locker? What's going on? And it gets explained. It is pretty funny that, like, yeah, I guess, like, what do you do when you come out of jail that you can get a paying job for? So he's literally just being a ref, like a daily. I know people like that in our town, not who are prisoners, but people who just like for extra work. If you do coaching or stuff like that, you'll just be the ref and they pay you by the day. So I'm sure like this guy, that's the kind of work you can find right now. So of course they're probably in pretty serious financial straits considering his, and this could be quite a windfall for them. His wife, meanwhile, does not want him to. She's worried about him having this conversation. And of course it doesn't go well. So the net starts to close in on Cliff. One of the coworkers goes and meets with Lizzie, I should say.
Lizzie.
And Aaliyah. And he said, he was bragging. I made fun of him for not having money. How are you going to afford an engagement ring? By the way, I guess we didn't know what happened to the Prater family. I assume they're not dead. They've probably just been intimidated into silence. I think if their bodies turned up, we would have heard about it on this episode.
Fair.
But I don't know if they've discovered anything new there. But, if the Dark Hearts actually figured anything out from that interrogation. But maybe they did because she may have seen Cliff in passing and Robbie by chance. But of course, Peaches had been bragging at work and had a big
What
role
an
on
idiot.
him. Yeah, of course. Of course, they're all idiots. But and not only is he like, I have cash on me, like, don't worry, you don't need to know how I made this cash. No, he's like, did you hear about those stash houses that have been being broken into? That was me and my buddies. Which buddies? You know that guy Cliff? Oh boy. So now they know about Cliff. Interesting at this point that they still don't know. I think this is very intentional, by the way, as far as setting things up. They know Cliff is involved. They still don't know about Robbie and Robbie's connection to Billy's murder, because when they're explaining this, I think it's very important that they're laying it out that, oh, how did they locate these things, these houses? And they're like, oh, they're garbage men. So it's like, aha, they're garbage men. They're staking out the houses, which of course seems to be at first, when we were introduced to this storyline early on, we assumed the same thing, that this is more arbitrary than it actually is. But they've been very smart. The very smart thing that is that they've been hitting other stash houses too. So they're like hiding their real intentions inside of these, more general stash house raids. So that is kind of clever on their side, although it didn't quite pay off the way they had hoped at this point. Most important aspect here, of course, is that they are literally headed towards Cliff's house. And Cliff, of course, gets them very close to the truth. And like I mentioned, they are literally entering Cliff's house. It is only the midpoint of the episode. I'm like, wow, a lot of episodes to go here. Just by luck, Cliff is not there. He's hanging out with Robbie like he always is practically every night. But you know who is there? Ray is there, and Ray's wife is there as well. Ray's wife, by the way, is Sting and Trudy's daughter. So yet another Sting offspring who's trying to dabble in acting now.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't know if you want to speculate on it at all, but I assume that everything they were saying about being able to move that fentanyl was probably BS, and they just wanted them to, hang on to it while they try to collect it at the house. And then how does this whole thing play out? Again, another very suspenseful scene in this show. I mean, they've been able to have these in every episode, a truly suspenseful set piece.
That is also dark.
That is also very dark, yes. In multiple ways. Yes. Tom gets chucked down the stairs and lands on his head, just like his wife. Oh my God. Oh my God. He even sees his wife at one moment. It's actually Aaliyah at the top of the stairs, but he imagines that it's his wife.
Well, he does have a concussion.
A serious concussion. Yeah, definitely. I mean, when he got to the bottom of the stairs, I literally was like, did they kill him? They can't kill him off. He's the star of the show. What the hell happened? Yeah, as if it's not bad enough. As if things aren't bad enough, he gets concussed now at this moment too, and in the exact same way practically that happened to his wife. He ends up at the hospital, but he wants to go and question Ray, or I guess I don't know who is this. I guess they have a medic at the police station. Who is this person? I don't know, but
it was definitely like an EMT paramedic type person. Where they came from, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess they have him on staff, I assume. But they wrap his head, which of course they always do that when someone has a concussion. He pulls it off because he says it looks stupid. It does look stupid. And especially when you're about to go and interrogate the person who shoved you down the stairs, you probably don't want to be wearing the wrapped head. But I do have a question, like anybody out there, maybe I have to ask my wife, does this do anything? Why do they wrap your head after you bonk it? I don't understand.
Yeah, ask your wife. I don't know.
She would probably know. While they're interrogating Ray, he doesn't have anything to say. And he says, and my wife is not talking. But indeed she does. And there's this great scene where Leah is interrogating the wife and immediately sees that she is an abused spouse, and then starts telling her own story, which at first I'm like, is this a ruse? But at some point I'm just like, no, this is real. Lizzie at least is.
Do you think so? I'm not 100% on that.
I did think at some point the details were specific enough where it was real. And by the way, I did watch the featurette afterwards, and they basically do say that it is real when they talk to the actress. So I would have been a little less confident about my answer if they hadn't spelled it out in that featurette. Because it could have been, right? She could have been really good at lying to them, which would be a very different thing that you're revealing about to be such a good actor. That tells you something about the agent in a different way. Either way, it's very savvy of her to be able to use this thing. And of course, she's also knows that she's like, if you're afraid of this guy, we can make him go away. There's a way to do that, So And at least Lizzie, in this particular case, is smart enough to keep her mouth shut. So at least in that way, she's learned
Oh,
that one
after
thing.
her peach ring introduction, yes.
Oh my God, she comes in.
Read a room, Lizzie.
And at first, I thought again, like, are we going to have some kind of redemption for her? Is she? Is this like a ploy? Like she's going to play the dim-witted one and go back and forth and like kind of use that as a tool to get the person's guard down? No, she's just walking in there like into an interrogation room talking about whatever random thing just happened to her.
And what we skipped over was her uselessness at the crime scene, right?
Oh my God, of course. Yes, because then that's part of the reason that he ends up at the bottom of the stairs.
Yeah,
she does not take action.
Is calling to her, asking for help, which you shouldn't have to do to begin with.
Right.
And she's just frozen and then ends up in this situation where she has to give chase. And even then, it's really Grasso that puts an end to the chase.
Yeah, she at least catches the guy, but then he's about to strangle her. She does, to her credit, she does smart enough to pull the flashlight out and flash it in his face. So she buys herself enough time for Grasso to do something. But yeah, again, I mean, you have that flashlight in your hands and you flash in his eyes, like, why don't you smash him in the face with it or something? That might do a little more good. But yeah, anyway, so she, and we find out later on that this is a pattern for her, freezing up. Once again, why are you doing this job, lady?
Seriously.
I also like very much a couple of things that I really like in the subsequent scene where as soon as she gets that information, she goes out into the hallway, she fills in Tom and Grasso, then they go in. And I love how this scene plays out, probably well researched. This is probably how it actually works. They don't have all the specific detail moment to moment to moment, but of course they have a lot of information, but they don't wait to get the whole story. They have like 5 minutes of like, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And they walk right in and they're like, at 3:05, this happened. At 3:06, this happened. And they're basically presenting like we know everything that happened for the entire past 24 hours. So immediately Ray's like, okay, I got to tell you everything. So yeah, I did like the way that they approached this and the way they got Ray talking. I also like the fact that Ray's like, I'm not saying nothing. And then the second that he thinks they know something, he tells them everything, everything. Yep. He doesn't leave a single detail out. But of course, very cleverly as well, he's like, I will tell you everything as long as I get amnesty for this so that I don't go back on my parole. But he's like, sure, I'll give you amnesty for this, but I won't give you amnesty for assaulting a police officer, which also breaks your parole. So you're going right back to jail.
Yeah, I mean, he really wasn't listening very carefully to the deal that he made.
Exactly. Once again, these people aren't really, I mean, in real life, these people are not the smartest people in the world. So
yeah.
And I mean, any of us in that situation would probably not be thinking that far ahead.
Anyone with a legal background would be, but yes.
Well, yes. That's why I would just immediately say, I need to talk to Sona if I ever get arrested. We're getting close to the end of the episode here. Cliff and Robbie know that they had rolled by, literally, coincidentally again, had shown up back at Cliff's house just as the cops were there. So they just roll through. Cliff is like, what's going to happen, man? They must have my picture. They know where, I mean, they're looking for me. There's probably an APB on me right now. So he's pretty freaked out. What are we going to do? And this is where I was talking about how Robbie's pretty delusional at this point. I hear there are parts of Canada you can just disappear into the woods. Let's drive over the border. We just got to get that money and make our break. By the way, in the middle of this conversation, they also get a text message from Ray. I was in the moment, I'm like, they're so dumb to think that Ray, like that's actually Ray texting them. But I'm like, well, they don't know that Ray was in the house. They don't know any of that. So they don't know that Ray's been picked up. They just know that they've somehow come to Cliff's house, which is true, right? They came to Cliff's house for the purpose of tracking down Peach's story. And of course, then they have Ray here, and Ray's like, yeah, they were going to sell fentanyl. I'm like, okay, I think we've connected all the dots at this point. But what about this plan? Sure, we're going to go to Canada with Sam. Is Sam coming with them? What is this plan?
I really don't know. They plan to get to one of those islands and just inhabit it like a castaway. It's very unclear what the concrete steps would be to continue your life in that way.
And they'll have like a brick of cash. And how are they going to spend that on their island? I don't understand. Like, it's once again, this is they're in fantasy land at this point. But they do get the text, and Ray even tells them, here's where we meet and at what time. He's really throwing them under the bus, by the way. You can imagine in that circumstance, you could say, oh, we always meet at 10 or at 9. And then at least like if they got that text message, they might be like, well, that's weird. Or he picked a different location to meet.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This seems sketchy, right? There's some way of, he's just like, nah, we meet at 11 at this park. So they get their usual text. So you know what, that's going to happen next week. They're going to be there. And
Mm-hmm.
they're probably going to be chased through the woods. We've seen it in the coming on.
Right,
There will
right.
probably be some chase through the woods at some point. And then Grazzo and Lizzie also go out for drinks. I like the fact that Lizzie, once again, has no game here. She immediately is just like makes a move on him. He's like, I'm not having sex with you. And then later on, she's like, goading him on, like, oh, Grazanova doesn't get
Yeah.
no, like
Mm-hmm.
she's trying to
Mm-hmm.
like pressure him into hooking up with her. I don't know. But I mean, if you had to bet on it now, do you think these two are going to hook up at some point in this season? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I would think if he's going to hook up with anyone, I don't think he's going to hook up with any of them, but I'm thinking if he would hook up with anyone, you have to be with somebody who's not going to be like, who knows what she would be like the next day. You'd be like, oh my God, what a nightmare this could be tomorrow. But it is clear that they are bonding these two characters together, though.
For sure.
She tells him a little bit about her background. She has frozen up in the past. And she's at this cop bar where she used to hang out with the other cops. And of course, some of them are there because that's where they hang out. And she's like, oh man, I shouldn't have come back to this bar. They're busting her chops about it. And then Grazzo, to make her feel better, actually ends up toasting her. What did you think about this whole interaction here and what he's trying to pull off here? I did find it interesting, by the way, when he gets up there. He's like, I know it's hard to be a cop nowadays because we have such a bad reputation. And people in the crowd are murmuring and stuff when he says that. And I'm like, isn't this a cop bar? Are most of the people there cops? I'm not sure what's happening in this scene and in that particular moment.
I don't know. Maybe there are also non-cops there.
Yeah, but would you react that? Would you start groaning in the middle of in front of your cop friends? It seems a little odd.
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. There's a bar in my neighborhood that is a fire department bar, but I actually have never been in there. So I have no idea how the whole dynamic works, but I see your point.
I know in some places the cops and the firefighters don't get along either, by the way. So that's another whole situation.
Interesting.
What do you think of the conversation that they have there with Grazzo? First of all, says that you're a good person. You know, I think that's the most important thing is to be a good person. And she says, good people make terrible choices all the time, which I think is another theme of this show, possibly.
Yeah, I think what both of them are saying is true, except I do agree with Lizzie that good people make bad choices constantly and end up screwing themselves. But I agree with Grasso's kind of the priorities in someone's character, right? That, okay, it is important that you are a good person with good intentions, even if your execution seems to be failing miserably and putting people's lives at risk.
Right.
Maybe you should reevaluate your career choice. That's a different issue.
That's another part of it. Exactly. And then we get to the end of the episode. Aaliyah has taken Tom home because he can't drive now that he's concussed. I like that he comes in and tells Sarah, who's still there visiting, and says, you know, he's got to, you know, don't let him go right to bed. He does go right to sleep, by the way. He shouldn't be sleeping that soon after. But more importantly, no drinking as he pours himself another giant drink like his usual ritual every night. Sarah had been texting with her husband previous to that. And she's just like, I can't wait for this to be over. And then what do you think about this moment? She goes out to talk to her dad and she says, Dad, I primarily am concerned for you that I don't want what happened to Mom to happen to you, in that like the mom was this outgoing and social person as far as she can say here. And then because of just constantly having to mediate the son's temperament and being afraid of being at home with him as well, that she was constantly fearful and became a very antisocial person. And she's just afraid that the same thing is going to happen to Tom if the son comes back into the house again.
I think, first of all, you glossed over one of the comedic moments of the episode, which was your dad got hurt at work at a career fair. So,
yeah, good point.
But second, and more importantly, I, really disliked her in the prior episode. I thought she was very cold and very unfair in how she was treating her sister because the sister is not a biological child. But here, I think her perspective is one that any child would have, and concern for the parent, especially when you are not there day to day to see what's going on. I totally understand where she's coming from. I do think, regardless of the outcome, Tom is in a bleak place.
Yeah.
We see that in so many ways. So I don't think there's necessarily, oh, but if he doesn't come home, you'll pick up the pieces and have a great
Right.
life. I'm not sure that's in the cards for Tom, but I do understand her point.
Yeah, it's like one more concern, right? Obviously, there would be him still drinking, still being depressed, still dealing with his career if he continues to work and all that. Those are the mundane things you still have to worry about with the parent. But obviously, having someone in the house that you think might be dangerous,
Right.
especially when you've already lost a parent, this is your
Right.
last parent now, is legitimate concern. And I do think some of it is self-serving. Like you mentioned, she kind of had this attitude that was very cold last episode. So they do give you more empathy towards her here. But I do think that even if she is a little calculating, most of what she's saying is legitimately true, right? And of course, he even agrees with her to some extent. He just interrupts her and says, I don't want him here. I can't forgive him for what he did. And so, and of course, unfortunately, this is exactly the moment that Emily comes and overhears that conversation. And I have to assume, given the connection that they're both adopted and he's his, I believe still that he's her biological sibling, that she can't help but feel some of that being like, I wish that she was gone too, right? To kind of that she's a reminder, obviously, even more strongly of what's happened. I don't think he actually feels that way, but I do think that's the way she internalizes it. I'm not saying that's what he's saying. I'm saying that her hearing that, you can only imagine how sensitive, I should say, teenage kids can be. And you can only imagine hearing that you're extending that to yourself as well.
I mean, this poor girl is really just torn and there's no right answer for her,
Yeah, exactly. And, it's all about, once again, that theme of forgiveness. Like, can Sarah forgive? Can she forgive? Can the father forgive? Can Robbie forgive what's happened to his brother? All of this, obviously, thematically in the episode. And they can't, obviously. That's not obviously, but they can't. So that is a significant problem. And they're going to have to, and without forgiveness, they can't move forward. But again, very easy to say. You need to forgive and forget when it's not you.
Yeah. And when it's something where people have lost their lives.
Right. Of course. Okay. 2 more very important scenes here. Tom, against doctor's instruction, does go to sleep and has this heartbreaking flashback scene of like the day they adopted the kids. We see that his friend was there. The priest was there as a mediator. So I think they were a foster family is what it seemed to be, because when he asks the wife in this flashback, what do we say when they come back in?
Yeah.
And she says, we couldn't imagine letting you go. So we decided not to. And this really, of all the heartbreaking moments in the episode, this one really got to me, because I think about looking back when things were better. Of course, that's always immediately touching in some way. But the idea that you're doing everything for the absolute best reasons. Everybody has a positive attitude about it. Everybody's happy about the circumstance in that moment. And it goes horribly wrong. And no one is to blame. It's really, truly tragic.
Yeah.
So yeah, one more heartbreak, as if we didn't have enough this particular episode. This one was maybe the hardest one of all. And of course, importantly, the last button on the episode, Joe, this other police officer, comes to talk to Tom and says, by the way, look, we have cameras at the location, at Cliff's location. And 90 minutes after you arrested Ray, this car rolled up. We look at the license plate. It's actually one of the lieutenants for the motorcycle gang. And he was there until 4 a.m. waiting to see if Cliff came back home. So who knew about the Ray and Cliff connection? And he's like, only my task force. And he goes, do you trust them? Did you vet them? He goes, I didn't vet them. I inherited them.
Fair.
And then he says, okay, do you trust them? Because it came from somewhere. So you got to look inside to find out who might be leaking this information. So another mole, Sona. What is going on with the show?
So here's the thing. Maybe there is a mole, but the task force isn't the only one that knows, because where did the task force get the information from? That guy that called the number on the tip sheet or whatever you call it, right? That Aaliyah and Lizzie handed out. And so to me, I would think he's the one that is spilling the beans.
Yeah, I had a different theory, by the way. I think that through the Prater family, they found out about Cliff, and they've been looking at Cliff as because Cliff hung out around the house as well, and that he might be wrong, that there's not a mole, but that they've been doing a parallel investigation, and that's how they got to the Cliff connection. I could also say that through the gun, maybe they would figure out that it's Robbie, but then they would be at Robbie's house. They wouldn't be at Cliff's house, right? So I think that it's possible that now he is going to be paranoid about his own team members when actually this information did not necessarily come from there. And I do think that that might be the case, because why have that final moment last week if them interrogating the Prater family has no payoff?
Right. Good point.
So I do think that might be where it came from. But I do think that the reason they have that in this moment is maybe to make us think about a mole, but maybe it is also to set up the fact that he's now going to be mistrustful of his own team and how that could be bad for the investigation. A couple other things I might have forgotten to bring up. One is we find out that Perry, when he's at the club, the barmaid that he was talking to, that at first I'm like, oh, is this unwanted advances? No, actually, I guess he's like messed around and they've hooked up and then he's dumped her or ignored her. So it's just like I've had my heart broken too many times. So she actually is indeed having some kind of relationship with Perry. And of course, she's the one who starts saying, who might be connected to a gun? You know what? I heard from one of the wives that Shane has been acting sketchy. And of course, Shane's been set up as, we know something bad is going to happen to Shane and that people are going to think that he's involved in some way since episode 1. That was like pretty much our speculation from the very start. So I think eventually, maybe as soon as next episode, he's going to get severely beaten or questioned in some terrible way. And of course, he's not even involved in this, and they are just speculating here. But importantly, Erin is there again to overhear all of this, and she has a very concerned look on her face. Maybe she's thinking, like, how many people are going to get killed or kidnapped along the way on my mission of revenge? So we are an episode away from the midpoint. What did you think about the episode, and how do you feel about how it's progressing from week to week?
I liked this episode, I think, the most of all the episodes we've seen, the 3 episodes we've seen so far. I think this show's doing a great job at moving the plot along and resolving issues while raising new ones. I think everything is developing really nicely. I'm enjoying the performances. I'm really looking forward to watching the rest of this. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm very curious as well. As was the case with Mare of Easttown, despite the fact that there were big shocks and satisfying conclusion to the mystery as well, that most of what kept people coming back, me personally, but I assume the audience in general, was more of the dynamic between the characters and wondering how the relationships are going to land at the end of the season as well. Yeah, and of course, you're vested and care about all these different people in all these different situations. So yeah, I was very satisfied with this. And I think the general opinion is that people like this episode the most of the 3, which does surprise me a little bit because I thought it was a little all over the place plot-wise, and it was a lot of plot revelation. But I think
a lot of plot.
A lot of plot and a lot of confirmation of things we had speculated on before. So I thought it was a little clunky, to be honest, but those emotional high points were really, really strong here. The performance is really great.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, really well done.
I will say, I think we hear a lot about how difficult this accent is to do. Yeah. And I feel like, and maybe this is like real life, everyone's kind of doing a different version of the accent.
Yeah. It also doesn't help that they all have, like, one's Irish and one is Scottish and one is Australian, like the actors themselves.
Yeah.
So it's like infused through their, home accents. It does amaze me though. And I guess this is the same thing with Mare of Easttown. They had like a coach that coaches everybody on this dialect. And they showed it. I think it was last week's, or I don't remember which one of these featurettes. You actually met this person, and the actors are saying that they are coached on their dialogue by this person who's on set all the time. And I literally started thinking like how they must be coached even in between all these takes, because they all, and like you said, these are all different variations of the particular accent, but it's just the fact that they maintain the accent through all their dialogue when they're having these very emotional moments. So yes. That's one more thing to think about on top of everything else. masking your accent with this other accent when you're still trying to have a believable moment. So just like one additional complexity to the performances. But I think everybody's doing a terrific job. Yeah. And I can't wait to see next week. This week, as I mentioned, a whole bunch of stuff coming out. Check out The Lowdown on Tuesday on FX and Hulu. I think the next day on Hulu. Alien Earth wraps up Tuesday night also, the same time that the premiere of that show. So I guess they're piggybacking one show onto the other. Although there's no connection between The Lowdown and Alien Earth. But I guess some audience, potentially some overlap in the audience, maybe. Oh, Slow Horses comes back on Wednesday as well. For anybody who's a Slow Horses fan, something I'll be watching. I've seen all the seasons up until now. I'm not sure if there's room to cover it here in a podcast, but maybe we'll dip in here and there. And Sona, we will be talking about The Savant on Friday. Quite a lineup for the podcast in the near term. All right, Sona, as usual, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, talk to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.